Welcome to another fascinating part of teaching and learning. And in this fascinating part, we're going to remember the often forgotten, most important people in teaching and learning, and that is the parents. So what we want to do is understand more the position of the parents, understand how we relate to them in a respectful and clear manner. And then after that, we can look at advice parents can give to their children to help them in their learning process. When that is done, we'll take a little look at some of the resources we have that we can share with parents. Let's start by putting the parent in context. So we have a society, and within that society we have schools, and the schools have a job to do, which is to build the educational outputs, to build the quality of people as future members of society, and we have parents and we have children. The parents are the essential link. We have the child who is going to learn, but their parents make a lot of very important decisions about what that child does in school. What we need to do as teachers is we need to make sure that that parent knows about what is happening in school. Perhaps also we need to let the parent know about how to educate their child, because often in language teaching and learning, parents make a number of mistakes. So as teachers, we can offer guidance to the parents. The thing that we have to keep in mind is that for the child, the parent is the most important. So our relationship with the parent is very important. And for the school, the parent is the most important, because the parent ultimately makes the decision on which school their child goes to. So what we want to look at over the next while in this presentation is how we as teachers can learn more from parents, how we can develop our relationship with parents, and how the parents in turn can improve the learning that their children do both in school and at home. It is not uncommon to see a parent go into a school and for that parent to perhaps sit down somewhere and largely be ignored. Yeah. The teachers are busy doing things, and perhaps the staff are busy doing other things. And sometimes parents think that really they are only noticed several times a year when they pay their fees, maybe when they get a report, and then when it comes to renewing their fees. Sometimes parents feel that we don't really value them, that we don't really respect them as important parts of the educational community. So the first thing that we want to make sure that we do for parents is make sure that you notice them. So we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but as a teacher, the absolute first thing you should do when you see a parent is greet them in a bright, friendly, clear voice using their name to let them know that they are welcome in the school. When you do that, then parents notice you. Yeah. And the truth is that for most parents, the school is the teacher. Yeah. Parents like to think that they're going to send their kids to a good school, but ultimately what they do is they believe the school will have good teachers. And if they have a teacher who is in a class with their children and the teacher is a good teacher, then they're very, very happy because their relationship is with the teacher and the child. So number one, we want to make sure that we have a good relationship with the parent. Number two, when we are talking to that parent, we want them to notice that we are professional, that we are clear, that we are precise, that when we give them feedback, we're doing it in an informed and honest and friendly way. So parents want to notice that we notice them, and that when we notice them, we are being professional in how we do that. We also want the parents to know that when we do things at school, and it doesn't really matter what it is, but the parents need to be informed about the educational benefits of particular activities, especially when it comes to language learning. They may not know that, for example, if they want their child to become a very good language user, then they must have playful times with language. They may not know that if they want their child to develop confidence in language use, then maybe an occasional drama class is also good for them. So one of our jobs as teachers is to, one, be noticed by the parents, and two, be professional and informed in terms of what we tell them and how we tell it to them. So we have those wonderful parents, and we want them to believe in us. And sometimes parents have little doubts. They know that the teacher teaches English, but strangely, they never see that teacher speaking English to another teacher, or they never see that teacher speaking English to anyone on staff. And this creates for parents a little sense of doubt, like, can the teachers actually speak English, or do they only really know a few words that they use in class? So this is, when you do this, an opportunity for parents to get to believe in you more. So if they're in school and there you are, and you're speaking to another teacher in English, or you're teaching it to, or you're speaking to the admin staff in English, they go, whoa, that's really good. These teachers are very professional. So that's what we want to see. That's what the parents want to see, and that will encourage in them a belief in you as a professional teacher. They also really want to see that what the kids have learned doesn't stay in the classroom, because they know that ultimately language learning is about, making their kids a little bit more worldly, a bit more international, a bit more capable in the future. So if you can get those kids to use English outside the classroom. So if they go home and they sing songs in English, or they do chants, or any other thing in English, well, then the parents are very happy, because they are already seeing that the child has moved their language competence into the home, and they can feel good in using it there. If you want parents to be really, really happy, let them see two kids outside classroom talking to one another in English. Then the parent feels so much happiness, they might even cry. So you can achieve that, then the parents really believe that the school is doing wonderful things. So the last thing that parents are very aware of, and for them is an important issue, very important issue, is that their kids are in a class. They know if the kid is happy. They know if the kid is working, if the kid is achieving. And of course, none of that will be the case if the kid is in the wrong class. It's probably the best predictor of unhappy kids if they're in the wrong class, either too high or too low. You know about this already because of the inputs that we've done on placement testing. But key thing is make sure the kids are in the right class. Then you've got happy parents who believe in the quality of the teacher and the school. There is always a requirement for evidence. You know, when you love someone, you've been married to them for a whole bunch of years, they also require evidence. Every now and then, it's got to be flowers, yeah. It's got to be something different. It's got to be something special to provide evidence that you do actually love them. And parents are the same. They need to see evidence. So they've got a kid in your school. Every now and then, of course, you're going to give them reports, a fairly general report on what their skill level is like, or it could be marks, what grades they got for this and that. You've got to do those. You've also got to make sure that you do real diagnostics. So if you're talking about the kid's handwriting, yeah, you need to say very clearly, he can form the letter A and D and F well. Yeah, needs some help with S. Yeah, the diagnostic has to be specific. When you're talking about the kid's voice, you can say he responds within 1 second or 2 seconds when I ask a question. Yeah, when he speaks at a good word speed with good rising and falling intonation pattern. So you've got to give parents diagnostics as well. Then they believe that you know what they're doing. You also need to make sure that you're giving them evidence on reading skills. So what is their reading achievement? How many words have they read in the previous week? Or how many words do they read per week? What level of reading are they at? And are they in fact on a reading program? Have you provided them with books so that they're progressing in their reading, or do they have some really good online reading system like Oxford provides? So you really want to provide that sort of information to the parent. If you can get the child to go home and interact with their mum and dad at home, then that is really wonderful. If you can get, and not just mum and dad, grandma, grandpa, brilliant. So if the kid can come home and then, pretend to be the teacher and perhaps teach grandma and grandpa what they've learned, or walk around the house and identify things, then that's a really, really wonderful thing, because in that, parents can get complete proof that that kid has learned language. If also in the school, and I'm sure you'll do this, if you can have kids do performances. And I know that we do speech performance and all that, and that's lovely. I did a lot of that myself as a kid. It's a really good thing to do, but maybe other things as well, some drama performance or something that displays that they've got high skill in language, even to the extent of reciting some traditional English poem. But yeah, for the parents, give them evidence that the kids are achieving. So when those parents arrive in the school, the moment they arrive, make sure you greet them. Make sure you greet them in a really friendly way, greet them in Chinese and in English, because the environment of the school is Chinese and English, and you want them to feel that they are part of it, not just visitors who are from a different place, who speak a different language or anything like that. You want to deliberately invite them in to the learning culture of your school. So greet them in Chinese and in English. And of course, after you've greeted them, see if they're comfortable. Can I get you a seat? Yeah. Can I offer you a cup of tea? Is the Wi-Fi good enough? Yeah. Is there anything else I can bring you? Yeah. So be very aware of the fact that those parents are in your school and you want to treat them like honored guests. So look after them as well as you possibly can. On the next level, and a very important level, is treat parents like intelligent human beings, yeah? Not just the people who provide the money and provide the children, but intelligent human beings. Don't feel afraid to say to a parent, let me tell you something about learning. Yeah, let me tell you something about how children learn language. Let me tell you something about how they learn things at different ages. And in doing that, you're showing respect for the parent and also showing that you are very professional and you're not afraid to share your knowledge. If you can, and this is a really, really wonderful thing to do, see if you can run evenings at your school or run evenings online where you have a speaker from your local community who's going to talk about perhaps culture. It could be anything to do with Chinese culture, it could be international culture, or they could talk about music, or they could talk about art. There's a whole number of things that they could talk about. They could talk about wine, they could talk about food, but the message that you're giving parents is that you value them, that you respect them, and when you do that, you will find that they believe in you. The parent will come into the school for a meeting, and sometimes they will be okay, very comfortable about the meeting, and then you're fine with that. Sometimes they will come in and they will be aggressive. Sometimes they'll be very shy or very nervous or unsure about what to do about their child, the child that they love, and that they want to believe is perfect, but they know maybe isn't. So they come in and they meet you. Try when you meet them to be prepared. When you say something, be brief. Yeah, don't talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Be prepared and be brief. Make key points. After you've made your key points and you're listening to them, make sure that when they say something, you take notes to indicate that you are listening to them. If you want to talk further to them, refer to your notes, the ones that you've made earlier, and perhaps the ones that you have made about what the parent has said. So you're communicating with them, primarily you're listening to them. Yeah, you listen a lot, you talk less. So the parent might be talking to you, observe them. How comfortable are they feeling? What is their body language telling you? What is their tone of voice telling you? What can you do to make them feel like they are sitting with a professional who wants to help them and wants to help their child? If you can do that, you've gone a really, really long way to making that parent feel very good. Now, when you're talking to a parent, pause. If you ask them a question, pause. Don't jump in with the answer. Yeah, it's a weakness we have sometimes as teachers, that we ask a question and then we wait 1 second and then we give the answer. When you ask the parent a question about something, wait, be patient, be calm, and then the parent will understand that you are a calm and confident professional that they want to work with. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to be clear and honest without offending the parent. It can be quite difficult. And I remember when I was a child that my parent, my mother, went to school to talk with the teacher because it was, normal reports time. And my teacher, who was a very nice guy, was talking to my mother. My mother told me afterwards, which I thought was very funny, that he said, yes, Frank is good at talking. He likes to entertain people by talking quite a lot. Now, what that really meant is Frank actually disturbs other children. He talks too much. But the teacher was very, very skilled in his delivery of that point, so that when I went home, my mother said to me, "You need to talk less in the classroom." And it hasn't worked. But anyway, that's the funny part of it. When you are the teacher, try and phrase the child's challenges in a positive way. As a kind of administrative or a management thing, try not to have the child with you when you're talking to the parent. Try and perhaps go and get them to draw something or write something so that you can talk openly and honestly with the parent. when you're talking openly and honestly with the parent, because you know what you both want, yeah? You want the child to be better in his studies, you want him or her to be better as a person. So you're going to ask the parent questions about the child at home, yeah? So at home, is he very active? At home, does he concentrate well when you ask him to do things? Is he attentive when he's doing his study? Ask those questions, because sometimes the child at home and the child at school are very different. Yeah. Then you can share with the parent what the child is like in the class, and maybe the parent can do something for that child by saying to them, look, you do this at home, you need to do more of it at school, or you're doing this very well at school, I think you should also do more of that at home. Yeah. So you and the parent can work together as a team. Now, when you're talking about the child, when you're talking to the parent about the child, be factual. Yeah, give clear, precise information. I think we've mentioned this already in terms of any diagnostics that you do, but parents really, really appreciate that. You know, if you even something as basic as of the 100 lessons we have had this term, he has been on time for all of them. Wow. Like, okay, that doesn't sound a lot, it doesn't sound amazing, but it's a really nice positive piece of information to give the parent. And if there are negatives, like 4 times this term, I've really had to tell Frank to talk less, for example. You know what it's like when you come to an end of a meeting and everyone goes away. You think, what was that meeting about? What did we learn? And sometimes meetings are exactly that, aren't they? People talk la 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 la, and at the end you think, what did we do? What did we achieve? You don't want the parent to feel that. At the end of the meeting, you want to sum it up. You want to look at your notes and say to the parent, okay, so it's been really lovely meeting you again. And so, you know, obviously you're going to thank them at the very end, but you're going to say it's been lovely meeting you again. And tonight we've talked about 5 things. And let me just check those with you. We've talked about this, 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 and this. What we're going to do later is my homework as the teacher is I'm going to do this. So you can expect that I'm going to be doing this in class, or I'm going to be doing this with the girl or the boy to help them improve. Now, my notes suggest that you're going to do some things as well. Can you tell me what they are going to be? Yeah, get the parent to verbalize what they're going to do, because you want an outcome from the meeting. You don't want just a little dance where you exchange a few words and go your own way. You don't want that. You want a meeting that has particular outcomes. Now, when you get towards the end of that meeting, give the parents some guidance. Now we're going to look at what that guidance is in the next few minutes of this presentation, but you want to give them guidance about what you think they could do at home to improve the child's attitude or the child's learning. When you finish, of course, you will thank them in a highly professional way. Say that you appreciate their time and that you feel that the time that you've spent in the meeting will bring real benefit for the child and for the mother and for you. So there's a lot of good advice that we can give parents to help them in their lives and also their children in their lives. So one of the simplest things to do to get a child to concentrate, and that's always the hardest. The child wants to play video games or, you know, eat some more food or, you know, run around or lie on the floor or some such. And you want them to do the study that they need to do. A really cool thing to do, and it's very good for the parent as much as it is for the child, is just to breathe in the lower stomach. Yeah, breathe in the lower stomach like this. And when you do that, just count the breath. So breathe in, breathe out, listen to that breath and count it. What you find with an activity like that is that you calm down almost immediately with practice. I think if I did 3 or 4 breaths now, I would probably fall asleep. But if you can teach that to a parent so that they can teach it to their child, and it's a really, really good life skill. So the child later on in life, when they're experiencing tension or anxiety, they can learn to breathe in their lower stomach to calm themselves down. So that's a really, really cool one. So the other thing that you want to address is sometimes children are anxious about learning. They feel they can't do it, they feel they're going to fail or whatever. So the parent can tell the child, okay, I think to be good, one, we have to be honest about what we're good at and not good at, but after that we have to feed ourselves. We have to give ourselves positive information to help us study and help us be better. So imagine that I'm the parent. So I say to the child, let me show you what I do. I go, I try hard to be a good mother. I work hard. I try to make good food. I try to look after my family, and I try to look after my friends. And then you say to the child, okay, in your study, what can you do? What things can you say that you want to do? And what positive things can you say about the approach you're taking? Okay, that's a bit complicated, but you know what I mean. So the child will learn to say to themselves out loud or in their heads, I like to study clearly and in a focused way. Too complicated, but I like to study and learn a lot and learn clearly. I try to enjoy my study. I try to review what I have learned. I try to tell my mum and my dad what I have learned. I want to be a good student. So in that sort of messaging, and you teach the child what it is they're going to say, they can say that to themselves on a regular basis. You're developing a positive self-image, and you're helping them decide what kind of learner and ultimately what kind of person they want to be. In looking at this part of the presentation, I'm reminded of the work of one of our colleagues, Jim Hawkins, who did his thesis on the effect that parent involvement had in child language development. So when the parent was involved in and affirmed and enjoyed English use, then the effect on the child was quite marked, especially boys. The girls, yes, but boys especially. When the parents had an interest in English language, then the boys' achievement level tended to go up significantly. When the parents were not involved, then the achievement level was quite low. So it's a very, very interesting point that children take a lot of messages from their parent, or their parents rather, in terms of what the parents really think, and what the parents really believe in. Sometimes parents will send the kid to school to learn English, but the parent doesn't really like it, doesn't really think it's worthwhile. So it's not the message that the parent really wants to give the child, because a positive message will ensure that the child learns more. So a parent can do something as simple as, okay, let's watch English TV together. Yeah. So we know that there's going to be some programs on at 3 or 4 or whatever o'clock. Let's choose a program that we can watch together. And then, of course, the parent can sit down with the child, arm around the child, and watch it together. That's a really strong message that the parent values the language. The parent can also say to the child, okay, I'd like you, if you can, to watch or listen to an online story, and after you've listened to it, and we can listen to it together, after you've listened to it, I would like you to tell me what you have learned or what you know from that story. I would love to hear what you have learned. And so that parent is giving the child the message that they want to be engaged in the learning, and also they want that learning to be a kind of communication. So the child learns something, and then after that learning, they've got the opportunity to communicate it to a parent who wants to hear it. This piece of advice is particularly useful for parents, especially when it comes to language learning. Now, maybe as the teacher, these are one of the many things that you can tell parents about learning. So parents may think that for language learning you need 100% accuracy, and of course you can't have that. It's just totally not possible. The only way that you could have that is if you memorize structures. But of course, language is supported by memorized structures, but the real thing for fluency is the fact that you are trying to make your language match how much you think. And you can't do that if the structures are very simple. So you have to continually push yourself. So when you're learning language, if you're doing a good job of learning it, you're going to make mistakes. So when parents know that, then maybe they can change their attitude to what they expect from their child, and maybe they can start giving their child right advice. So, for example, when their child is talking to another child in English, or when they've done some of their homework from school and they've made some mistakes, the parent wants to affirm that mistake making is normal. The key thing is that you learn from the mistake. So the parent might say, oh yes, I remember a mistake I made when I was young and working in the office, and my boss said, we have a meeting, can you make some copies of the agenda for me? And so I thought, okay, the boss needs copies of the agenda, so I made him a copy or two, I think. Then I went to the meeting and there were 20 people there, and the boss said to me, where are the copies? Oh, so I learned from that next time the boss said, can I have some copies? I said to him, how many would you like? Black and white color, one side or two side? And so I learned, and also the boss learned. So the key thing is not that you don't make mistakes, but you learn from them, especially in language. Similarly, the parent may say to the child, okay, let's think about what you're doing in your study. Let's think about what you're good at and what you're not good at. And let's think about the things that you want to be better at. Think about those for a minute or so and then tell me what they are. Now, when the parent is asking the child to do that, the parent is asking the child to think about their own thought process, to think about their approach to learning. And then the parent is developing in that child a very clever mechanism for deciding what he or she needs to study, how it should be different, and specifically what he should really target if he or she wants to be better. So in a different presentation on motivation, we looked at the effect of motivation on learning, and it's very strong. And what you can do with a child as a parent, so you're a parent, you're talking to the child, you want to get them to verbalize, to state or write why it is that they want to be better at English. And it could be anything. It could be, I want to get better marks. It could be, I want to be able to watch English programs in English. I want to be able to play English video games in English. I want to have better talk with my teacher. If we go on holiday to a foreign country, I want to be able to speak in English to people. But get the child to identify why it is they're learning English, and this will keep the child motivated. Another technique that a parent can both suggest and exemplify is how when you're studying, it's always really good to stop every now and then and ask yourself what it is that you have learned. So basically, in doing that, you're encouraging your memory to become retentive. And so the parent wants to tell the child that. Now, the parent can give an example, yeah? The parent can take up a book and look like they're reading through the book and then get to the end of one paragraph and then say, okay, so what I learned is la la la. So demonstrating a technique for a child. So this is another way of not only encouraging in the parent an awareness of good education, but also encouraging in the parent awareness of techniques that will help their children learn better. We know that review and practice is an important part of any form of learning. And so if the parent can say to the child, let's take the vocabulary or grammar that you've been learning and maybe we'll cut it up into little bits and we're going to put it somewhere special. Where would you like to put it? Let's put it somewhere unusual, like under the chair, yeah, or under the bed, or in the fridge, or in the freezer, or something like that. And every now and then we can go and take it out and review it. Would you mind if I take it out and ask you questions about it? Would that be all right? And then let the child agree to that as something interesting and different. And then, of course, the parent can do that every now and then, and it becomes kind of fun, kind of a game. Maybe you could hide it and see if they can find it. Another technique that's really useful is for the parent to say to the kid, okay, now when you're speaking English, if you don't know a word, that's okay. Use something similar. Yeah, use an example. Say it's like la la la. Of course, the parent may not be able to explain that in English, but they can exemplify it in Chinese. Yeah, so they could say, okay, so in English you don't know one word, you use a similar one, just the same as in Chinese. So what's another way to say la 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 in Chinese? And then the child comes up with one, and then the parent has demonstrated for the child a really useful technique for extending or perhaps consolidating or strengthening their vocabulary in English. You will probably know already that in terms of learning a language, the most important thing is what you hear, what you listen to, and how clearly you can recall what it is you have heard. Because if you're recalling it correctly, well, then you're thinking correctly in that language. So the parent can say to the child, okay, let's practice a listening technique which will be very good for you in English. I'm going to say something, and so the parent does say something in, say, 7 words in Chinese, and then at the end of it, the child has to repeat it exactly. It's a little challenge, actually, and the parent can develop this as something that the child can do. And then maybe one day the parent can choose a little bit of a text in English and play it and get the child to repeat it. And this way the parent is developing really good listening skills for the child. Now, when a child comes home
at the end of a school day. Some parents will say to the child, "What did you learn today?" And of course, that's a good question, but it's really not the best question. Yeah. Because it's very hard to go through and list what you've learned in a day. But if the parent says to the child, "Teach me something you have learned today," then it's much more interesting for the child. The child is in a position where suddenly they are the teacher, where suddenly they have something that they can help their parent with. Yeah, the role has changed. And so then the child can go ahead and in a kind of adult and intelligent way teach the parent. A really, really nice change in the relationship and also a really good technique. If you try and teach yourself what you think you have learned, you discover whether or not you have actually learned it. There's always a fine line between what we do as teachers and how much we help outside the classroom. But I think it's an indication of your strength as a teacher and the strength of your school that you can help kids to learn outside the classroom. So this app, Fun Easy Learn, is a very, very good one. It's as good for parents as it is good for kids or high school kids. It's very sound in terms of its educational value. So it has lots of pictures, it has good audio, gives you lots of opportunity to practice in many, many different ways. And it also has that kind of game element, which makes it enjoyable. And of course, after you do each section, you get a percentage or you get a grade. So something like this is really good for you to suggest to parents that they can use with their kids. You may even suggest to the parents, well, while you're using it, why don't you look at perhaps learning English or Italian or Spanish or any other language, because it's a really good start. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that you can do to help parents help their kids and also help themselves. This is another great site that will make your parents feel very, very happy in terms of having you as their teacher. It's a great site. It's CBBS, obviously, originally from the BBC and still part of the BBC in the UK. And BBC has always been known for the quality of what it produces, and this site is no different. There's a lot of resources there for kids to learn from: phonics, stories, many, many things, videos, games, lots and lots of stuff, but also has really good information for adults. So adults can click on a whole number of topics in order to learn more. As I say, there's a lot in this site really well worth going to. You don't have to share it, of course. You might just want to keep it for yourself because there's a lot of really, really good stuff there. We have looked, or you will look at phonics in greater detail in a different part of the course, but for this reason, we're not really going to go into this very much now. But this site, Kids Phonics, very, very good. Huge range of material there. Once again, there's so much material there. You might share it with parents or you might just keep it for yourself. The Cambridge English site is also very good. And of course, being Cambridge, it's got a very extensive range of material and activities, and the range goes from very young learners all the way up to exam classes. So the Cambridge one is one of those sites where, if you had only got one site to go to, I would probably go to that one. We are talking again about the Khan Academy, and that's because we have to. The Khan Academy has got so much, and almost every relevant subject if you're a kid studying at school. Very, very well designed, very good pedagogy, and of course, not expensive for you to visit. So a site that's good for both parents and for kids. So great, great site. Can't recommend that one strongly enough. FunBrain, also a very good site. Focus on math and reading more than anything else, and a great range of tasks and supporting material there. And of course, you can buy a whole range of readers if you want to extend your kids' reading skills there. So that's a wrap really for talking and reporting to parents. And I hope that in this presentation we've got a bigger awareness of how important parents are for us, how much we should try to engage them more in the learning, how much we should show them respect, and how we should relate to them when we see them in the school space. Also, that when we're relating to the parents, we actively give them support as the people who spend a lot of time with their children. And if we can encourage them to relate to us as professionals, and if they can listen to your advice as a professional about how their kids can learn, and if you can give them supporting resources, well, then you will find that the parents are helping you as a teacher. And when they help you as a teacher, then the learning is better and the children learn more, of course. So this presentation is really designed for us as teachers just to be aware that when we're teaching, that the parent is one of the most important parts of the educational community.